Junhui Lin from the University of Illinois, and she's going to be giving a talk about BEEER, distributed record and replay for medical devices in hospital operating rooms. So, Junhui, please take it on. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. This is a joint work with Avesta, HoTSoS, and my advisor Carl Gunter at University of Illinois. So operating rooms has gone through great changes in the past few years. In ancient times, medical examinations were carried out by magicians and priests. In World War I, medical surgeries were performed in battlefield tents with very limited technical supports. However, in recent years, the development of operating rooms has speed up. Now we have a lot of modern devices connected in an operating room, and is much more similar to a data center compared to anything else before. Moreover, connection is also the trend of future operating rooms. For example, this is a picture of a modern operating room, and the patient in the room is usually connected to multiple devices, such as the insulin pump and several monitors. According to the measurements of the monitor, the insulin pump can automatically inject insulin into the patient based on the measurements, and this process does not involve any human intervention. However, come together with the great convenience is great risk. There has been a lot of critical flaws identified in medical devices, and some of these attacks can even be carried out remotely without access to the device. Moreover, medical devices has also been a target market for attackers because of several reasons. First, medical devices has a large attack surface. On average, each US hospital has 10 to 15 connected devices per bed. Counting hundreds of beds per hospital, this results in a lot of vulnerable medical devices that can be potentially attacked. Moreover, these devices are not well defended against potential attacks. According to a study, 53% of healthcare facilities and 43% of manufacturers do not carry out any tests in their devices, and only 51% of device makers abide by the FDA guidelines. Even more serious is the serious consequence when medical devices are attacked. This brings huge profits to attackers. For example, an LA hospital paid out $17,000 when hackers took control of their computer. Then take the insulin pump example. If the adversary takes control of the insulin pump, he can inject an abnormal amount of insulin into the patient, causing irreversible damage to the patient. Moreover, he can also carry out this attack by injecting malicious code into the server that upgrades the software of the insulin pump. Therefore, he does not even need to access the device to perform the attack. So how can we defend against these attacks? Deploying intrusion detection system is a potential solution. However, it involves changing all the medical devices, and actively collecting all the data from all devices brings a lot of overhead. Deploying intrusion prevention systems is also challenging because for medical devices, it's crucial that nurses and doctors can access the device when needed. If we prevent them from accessing the device, the consequence can be severe. So in this project, we propose using recording and auditing device logs to identify causes of attacks and helps forensic investigations. However, recording and auditing single device logs is not enough. In modern operating rooms, the output of one device will be the input of another device. For example, in this case, the output of the monitoring device would determine how much insulin should be injected into the patient, and this acts as the input of the insulin pump. When the system is being attacked, it's hard to determine whether it's the insulin pump being compromised or is the monitoring being compromised and giving abnormal output. In both cases, the consequence would be that an abnormal amount of insulin is injected into the patient. However, by observing single device log, we cannot determine which is the case. So to solve this problem, in this paper, we propose the BEEER architecture. It is a distributed record and replay system with the ability to record each device individually and replaying them from each device in parallel. In BEEER, we adapt a master-slave architecture. So we assume each medical device is connected to the BEEER master server and can exchange messages with the server. In BEEER, we have two phases. In the record phase, we modified R-Node, which is a record and replay system for single devices. And we designed two algorithms to synchronize across devices. In the first algorithm, we applied device synchronization with NTP. However, we observed that there is a large overhead when using NTP to synchronize device within a small interval time. So we designed a novel projection protocol that reduces this overhead, but still preserves the causal ordering of events across devices. And in the replay phase, we designed two novel algorithms, the log merging algorithms to merge logs collected from single devices, and the token distribution algorithm that guarantees the events are replayed in the same order as they are recorded. So first, let's look at recording. The goal of distributed recording is to preserve the causal ordering of events across devices. In traditional distributed systems, there are two types of causality. For the local causality, we want to preserve event ordering on the same device. That is, if event A happens before event B on the single device, then in the recorded events, event A should appear before event B. Another type of causality is message causality. That is, the receiving of a message should always happen after the sending of that message in the recorded logs. However, for cyber-physical systems, this is not enough, because in cyber-physical systems, devices can interact with each other hiddenly throughout the physical world. For example, in this case, when the insulin pump injects some insulin into the patient, there is a reaction in the patient's body which causes the change in the measurement of the monitor. Therefore, the injection of the insulin pump is the cause for the change of measurement in the monitor. However, this causality is not captured by any of the causality defined in traditional distributed systems. So we call these types of causality the CPS causality. It's hard to preserve ordering of CPS causality because CPS causality is not explicitly logged in any devices. And this interaction is throughout the physical world, and we do not have any log about how these devices interact with the physical world. However, in medical systems, this is a bit easier because we can take advantage for the on-site time, which is the time it takes for medication to have physiological effect on a patient. So for most of the drugs, the on-site time is much longer compared to the delay in digital systems. For example, for injecting of insulin, the on-site time is about 5 minutes to 2 hours. Therefore, we can safely assume that the on-site time is greater than the network latency, and because it's the CPS assumption. With this assumption, to preserve the CPS causality, we only need to preserve the ordering of events with intervals greater than the CPS threshold, which equals to the on-site time. So how do we preserve this causality? Let's look at an event graph for insulin pump example. So we have the monitor that's taking the measurements from the patient, and we have the insulin pump that injects insulin into the patient. And for M1 represents the first measurement of the monitor. After these measurements, the monitor sends a message to the insulin pump, and upon receiving this message, the insulin pump injects insulin into the patient. This injection causes the monitor to change after a few minutes. So this is the second measurement, M2. If we use the causality, the algorithm to preserve causality in traditional distributed systems, then this injection event would be considered parallel to the second monitoring event, M2, because there is no explicit message exchanging between these two devices, between these two events. So to guarantee CPS causality, we ask each device to send a projection message after each event to the BEEER master. Since the network latency for this projection message to arrive at BEEER master is much smaller compared to the CPS threshold time, which equals to on-site time, we can guarantee that the projection message of this injection event arrives much earlier compared to the projection message of the second monitoring event. Therefore, the event ordering on the BEEER master naturally preserves the CPS causal ordering of the events. However, sending a projection message each time after an event can be costly because of the network overhead. So we can batch events that happens consecutively within a small interval. So for example, in this case, the insulin pump performs the injection almost immediately after receiving the message. Therefore, the interval between these two events is much smaller compared to the on-site time of any drugs. So we can batch the projection message of these two events with a single batched BEEER message and reduce the communication overhead. As long as the interval between the batched events plus the network latency is smaller than the onset time of drugs, we can still preserve the CPS causality on the projected BEEER master messages. So for merging these logs, we consider four possible cases. First, let's look at case C, where the S represents the start time of the event, and E represents the end time of the events. In case C, the end time of the first event is earlier than the start time of the second event. So we know that the first event happens before the second event. In case D, the start time and end time for two events happens around the same time, so these two events can be considered parallel. However, in the first two cases, case A and case B is a bit tricky because for case A, although event B starts after event A, although the second event starts after the first event, when the second event starts, the first event hasn't ended yet. So we set a certain threshold to determine whether these two events could be considered as parallel or as consecutive. So if the interval between the start of the first event and the second event is smaller than the set threshold, we assume that the influence of the first event could not influence the execution of the second event. So we consider these two events as parallel. However, if this interval is greater than the threshold, we consider the second event as happening after the first event. And to guarantee that the events are replayed in the same order as they recorded, we design a token distribution algorithm. Before executing each event, the executor would send a token request to the BEEER master. And the BEEER master will grant this token if there is no other events taking the token. So when the token is granted, the BEEER master would put this token in the active token queue. And as long as there exists a token in the active token queue, no other token would be granted for other executors. When the first executor finishes replaying the event, it will send a message to the BEEER master who will delete the event token in the active token queue and grant new tokens for consecutive events. To reduce network overhead, we would batch consecutive events from the same executor into the single token. So if a same executor executes like 10 events in the same row and during this process, there is no execution on the other executor, then we can grant the token for these 10 events at the same time to reduce network latency. So according to the evaluation, after batching with the BEEER replay protocol, the protocol has little overhead compared to using a single R-node replaying mechanism. To sum up, medical equipment are one of the most vulnerable embedded devices, and in this project, we designed, deployed, and evaluated a distributed record and replay solution that records every equipment in an operating room. Our solution is available for other embedded devices as long as they support a form of Linux as their operating system. Are there any questions?